Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Equine Episode Examination, where today we will be discussing the brand new MOP episode that premiered this past weekend, Fame and Misfortune. If this is your first time joining us, pretty much like I said, we're just going to discuss the episode. Everyone can kind of give their opinions on it, and we'll have a big discussion on everything involving the episode, both the people here in the call and everyone in the chat as well. If you're watching this on a recording, we do stream this live Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time at CinemaQuestria.com. So if you want to come and join in on the discussion, that would be the place to go on that time. Or if you're watching this live somewhere else other than the website and you want to get on the chat, just head on over to CinemaQuestria.com/stream, and you can join our Discord or IRC chat and get in on the discussion here of the episode for today. So I'm Rachel. I have a few people here in the call if they want to quickly introduce themselves.
Hey guys, it's Mr. Ben.
Hey, Mr. Ben.
This is Jay Smith. This is Jay Smith.
I'm a potato. Hi.
Hey, Potato.
Can we I'm just curious. Can everyone in the call, or not everyone in the call? Can everyone in the chat hear us on the call? Because I know we had some technical issues. With
No, that was my problem. Whenever just don't worry about it. It's fine. I can see everyone's voices going out. So.
Okay. I just want to make sure the chat can hear us. That's my main concern. I apologize.
Yep. So let's see. We'll get to the right screen here. So yeah, Fame and Misfortune, that's the episode that premiered this Saturday. So what was everyone's initial thoughts on the episode?
Well, yeah, that's pretty much what Jay said. I mean, the whole thing just went totally meta. Never thought it would ever happen to be that way, to be perfectly honest. Not that I'm really complaining, just...
By the way, that's Mr. Ben playing Sonic Mania in the background, not Matt, surprisingly.
Which I probably shouldn't be doing, admittedly. I can go
See,
ahead.
I'm the one that behaves. That's kind of shocking. But yeah, initial thoughts on the episode. I can't pigeonhole this episode. The more I've watched it, the more I feel a bit. I don't know. I don't hate the episode in any way. I don't even dislike it. In fact, there's a lot of things I find bloody hilarious. But I don't quite understand why this was necessary, when the fact that fandoms are always been like this and always probably will be. Is it to address fandom complaints? Because it doesn't really do that. Is it just to make the fact that just constantly calling people out over the same things over and over is a bad thing? Well, the thing is though, if it's just a number of the same of people just having the same opinion, maybe it's a fact that problem is a problem, or it's not. People are nitpicking too much of that. I think overall the episode is fine and it's fun, but if there was an ulterior motive beyond it just being some entertaining fluff where people can take things out, out of context, perhaps that's even the meta of that is like, hey, you if you're taking this episode out of context, then we're essentially trolling you, and it's like, I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me if they keep doing this. Let's just say that for this one episode, fine, but with the show being on for as long as it's been on, I can sort of understand why they've done this, kind of, but it's kind of amusing that even the actual sort of the actual, I know we'll get to writing, but even the writing is like sort of semi-controversial in the sense of who actually did write the episode ? I just find it all very, very odd, and when you consider like what's happened in the previous 13 episodes of this season, it just comes across as just off to me. Maybe it's just me.
Well, I think the message, at least in my opinion, I thought there was quite a few different messages in here to take away, and one of the main ones being around not everyone, you can't always please everyone, and sometimes it's worth it to do a lot of work, even if a lot of people don't receptive or miss the point that those few people that you are actually able to touch and are able to kind of get across a message or help out, can make that worth it for you.
I kind of feel another reason is not just so much that the message was also because I agree with you that there was maybe more than one message being tried to be told here. The first of which being that you can't please everyone, like you mentioned. But I could also go so far as to interpret the message saying that if you're going to put yourself in the limelight, then beware of psychos, stalkers, and loonies. And the third, possibly, that some people's going to take your product as an excuse to fight and argue with each other, and it's best to learn just to deal with them and then concentrate on the people who actually appreciate it for what it is. But I also think that this is like one of those issues where it's not so much the message is where like some of the controversy is in so much the message itself, but how it's presented. It's not like what you said, it's how it's said. Basically.
It's very on the nose with this episode, and
So,
it knows it, which is, I suppose, in a sense, what kind of just about saves, I say just about, it's what saves the episode. Being meta and it being, more than a little self-aware of it, is what saves the episode. But I just find it ironic that there's, even with this episode, even outside of the episode itself, there's controversy over the episode, which kind of just about says everything you really need to know.
But yeah, I feel that the show is trying to come across that they are technically poking fun at the more extreme parts of the fan base, but I think that they're trying to do so in an affectionate way.
This isn't the first time they've kind of done that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're not trying to be overtly malicious or anything like that. They're not trying to. They're not doing it like a Teen Titans Go in the sense where like, hey, yeah, this show that you used to like, yeah, it's crap, and we're never gonna make it again. That's the type of thing that I got from that show. I don't get that from this episode here, for example.
I think it doesn't help that shows like Teen Titans Go have done episodes not necessarily the same as, but similar to this. And because Teen Titans Go has done it so many times, when another show does it, I think you're always going to start off on a bad footing because of how poorly shows like Teen Titans Go have done it. Which that shouldn't be a criticism of MLP, or if any other show does something similar to this in future, or even if they've done it in the past. But it's always going to be that kind of stigma that's around because of TTG doing how it's been doing it. I'm not going to say that I necessarily agree that this episode does it badly. I think it does it well, or as well as it could do. But I think the thing is with this episode is if you take it out of put it into a vacuum and just ignore say these complaints from ponies and that like a proxy for what fandom complaints there are. If you take that out and just put the episode in a vacuum, the episode works a little bit better, especially with having Tularula and Coconut. Is it Coconut Cream?
I think it was.
Yeah, the two fillies. The fillies actually learning the actual lessons from the friendship from the friendship journal, I think it's the key thing here. And I think the thing is, a lot of people, the reason why Twilight wanted this book to be published, or at least made available to other ponies, was the fact that they would be able to learn from the experiences that the rest of the main six have. But instead of that, many have essentially just basically played favourites and saying, oh, this pony should be, they've learnt this lesson before, they should have not learned it again, or I like this pony over this pony because this pony's more exciting or more interesting, or blah blah blah. And I think a good message is don't lose sight of what something is is basically trying to actually achieve. And sometimes you can look too deep for things that aren't necessarily there, like I've probably done with this episode already today.
What makes it funny is that, outside of this particular episode, what's actually kind of made, somewhat hilarious in hindsight is that there was actually an ongoing fan fiction started 5 years prior to this, which is about two ponies dedicated to teaching the magic of friendship to others through the Book of Friendship, which contains all the friendship lessons that Twilight Sparkle learned throughout her lifetime. Name of the fan fiction called Book of Friendship. And this whole episode is just kind of like a bit of an idea on that. Anywho, that has nothing to do neither here nor there of this. One of the things, though, is that I understand that, yes, while there are some fan ponies here in this episode, which are maybe an over-the-top exaggerated parody of the worst kinds of fans, and, most fans don't actually act like that, but the thing to keep in mind is that, yes, there are some fans that are indeed that bad, or they can get that bad when they get so caught up in petty arguments or hung up on certain details that they just forget to relax and enjoy the show for what it is. One of the other messages that the show really doesn't come right out and say, but you should probably I suppose you could probably kind of pick up on this, is that you should probably just keep in mind that everyone who works on the show is a real person with real feelings, and they're occasionally going to have an off days. So, have an off day or two. And you really shouldn't just, be part of the crazy fan mentality that, picks up the torches and pitchfork whenever they, see something that they don't like.
Okay, well let's go on. Let's move on to the story and the writing of the episode. Then, as we've kind of been talking about and stuff, this episode was written by M.A. Larson, which is
quote unquote. Quote.
Here we go.
I mean, it's not.
The thing is, though, it says on the episode it's written by M.A. Larson, and the show apparently since season 6 has now actually the writing or writers that are used in the show are unionized. So, at the very least, we can tell by the fact that the show is now unionized that if M.A. Larson's credited for this episode, then he must have written at least a of the episode for him to be solely credited for it. The only other writers potentially that could be for this episode would be Joanne and Christine.
So as far as we know from everything that's been put together, M.A. Larson wrote this episode for this season. As far as I could tell from everything that I've gathered there, this wasn't an episode that was written for season 5 and shelved for later, because that wouldn't really make any sense for it in a lot of ways. As far as I can tell, it doesn't seem like it was an episode that it was like completely, like a lot of people can think that, they just completely changed it and rewrote. What I think happened was probably based on some of the commentary he gave about the changes in kind of how the writers operate with the show since the beginning of the show. I would say that he didn't initially come up with the concept. He was given with the concept to write a story about. So it wasn't his initial concept. He wrote the actual episode based around the concept. And then I'm assuming what probably happened is, as the writing of the episode was going on and drafts were being done, he was receiving a lot of probably notes from Hasbro, Joanne and Christine, etc., to make changes that he probably didn't like to it. And so that's probably why he was sort of referring to things like not being exactly what he wrote, or not his, really his episode, because all of the stuff that had to be, that all the things that he had to change based on the notes from what he was getting back from those things, based on how he was the sole credit for it. And I don't think that much was changed, besides I believe the ending we know was changed after he wrote it, but most of the rest of it, besides little changes, were about the same as he wrote it. At least as he wrote it, not including any notes that he got back to change it while he was writing.
He says he had nothing to do with the wings line, but the funny thing is that that's literally the most Larson line in the whole episode, which I just find bizarre, to be honest. It's just bizarre how defensive he's been about the episode. Perhaps he just knew after he wrote it and sort of thought about it, thinking, this is gonna rub some people up the wrong way, because I know how some people in this fandom work, and I see that. I don't necessarily subscribe that it was done with that intention, but I think the intention of the episode was actually a good one. Whether the execution is as good as it could have been, I think, with the fact that I think the problem that is, because Larson is really, since he started doing the Penny Royal Academy books, he's pretty much been sort of out of the loop. It probably would have made things slightly more difficult for him anyway, regardless if he was given more less of a tighter leash, or less more creative freedom for how he could write an episode sort of for this season. So it's difficult to say, but you mentioned that he was basically essentially given like a story template as such, and he sort of had to write around that. Isn't that kind of done most seasons, where there's like the head writer will have set themes that are supposed to be for certain episodes, and then they're written around those? Or am I
It depends on what what the episode is, how it ties in with the season story arc, etc. I mean, a lot of writers will take a whole concept from start to finish and come up with the concept, write the concept. Sometimes other writers will come up with the concept but not actually write the episode, and another person will write the episode. Someone may come up with the general story and make a whole outline of it. That's where you see people get like story by credits and like teleplay by credits. If someone actually writes the story and does a whole outline for it, but then another writer will come and actually flesh that outline out into an episode, that can also happen. I know M.A. Larson had previously said that like Amending Fences was like the last episode that he wrote that he took from start to finish. Like, it was his concept, he wrote it. It didn't have a ton of changes afterwards.
In season 5, he was co-story editor for it, sort of like at least half.
For that episode, and all the episodes he wrote too, where he was story editor of those. Correct.
Yeah, hands-on approach to that season than he did obviously writing here. I think that might well be, sort of the case why he's been a little bit more sort of standoffish, sort of, because it's not his like concept, from start to finish. He's, of the opinion, that only M.A. Larson can say exactly what things in that episode were exactly 100% his doing, and how much other things were like changes by someone else, or just minor adjustments. Because when an episode is written for any animated show, there's always going to be at least some minor changes to when it's actually broadcast, just for either things are cut for time, or things that adding to want to animate something. There might be like more sort of more quiet reflective piece inside the episode or whatever. So it's not there's no like one flat line from when something is created or written to it actually being what you see on the screen. There's gonna be there's not necessarily rewrites, but there's going to be editing. There's going to be changes. That's why the show has story editors in the first place. So it just kind of, I find it iffy that Larson has been so incredibly sort of defensive about this episode in particular. I mean, he was defensive of well, but I think most people were more aware that obviously that the end game of that episode was obviously a Hasbro mandate. There's no question about that. Whereas this episode, that doesn't seem to be quite the case, because this episode is not exactly here to push any particular toy line. It's here to just tell a story.
Yeah, and of course, there's a lot more that goes into creating, an animated episode other than just the writer as well, in terms of storyboarding and, voice acting and whatnot.
Yeah, because that's another thing that was being leveled, was that Big Jim Miller was one of the ones that had actually to it, but he mentioned that he couldn't do any major edits to it because of the episode, the show now having Writers Guild members actually writing for the show. that they're not under they're basically under contract, that they can't really do that, without it being, sort of, unless it's absolutely necessary, sort of thing.
Yeah, and what he was referring to is back in season 5 when he actually, remember, got a story credit on a couple of episodes there in that season, and they're not able to do that anymore because they have to be a member of the Writers Guild in order to actually write for the show.
Because it's interesting to note that since the beginning of this season, there's not been any story by credits at all so far. There's only
Well, see,
just been
I
writer.
I don't.
A couple of writers.
But I do think those are still possible as long as the people that are writing the story, the story credit or whatever, are members of the guild.
Season 1 had no story by credits for any of the episodes either, so it's not like it'd be the first time it's happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just has to do with how ideas are coming and how Joanne and Christine are sort of running the season there as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the sad thing is, I really think this was a good, enjoyable episode. Yeah, it pokes fun at the fandom, but I mean, it never felt malicious to me. Because what they were poking fun at were some of the most, like, generic and stereotypical complaints that we have about the show. They weren't calling out, like, hey, Matt the Shadow Man, you suck, kind of thing. It was kind of like, making fun of, I liked Twilight before she had wings, and stupid stuff like that. The staff has always kind of poked fun at... Yeah, the staff has always poked fun at the fandom like that.
If you look at some episodes like of Teen Titans Go, like Serious Business, which basically, and The Return of Slade, what they address very specific complaints, like, oh, there's always bad lessons in this show, or oh, this show doesn't take itself seriously. It's like essentially basically looking at one specific complaint and basically saying, well, fuck you, this is why you're wrong, sort of thing. Whereas this episode, it takes much broader strokes.
Yeah,
it's every character.
Yeah. And it's the main story of it isn't even really focused on Pony. It's something that's very generic to all media. It's an episode that's sort of taking us through how media can have reactions that the authors don't intend, or people kind of miss the point of something, or overanalyze something. It's not very specific, something that's necessarily specific through the show, but they use those sort of meta humor to sort of make it familiar to us as an audience as to the points that the episode is trying to show. I actually really like how they did it as well, because, we're all talking about how meta it is and stuff, but I actually think it fits really well into the show because how they used Twilight publishing her friendship journal. It's a really kind of natural way to make the episode happen, to show, like, if we want to have people kind of critique our characters here, how could we do that in universe and make it believable? And well, they published their friendship journal from season 4, and had people kind of read that and almost are reacting to it as if it is fiction rather than something, a log of what actually happened to the main 6, and judging it as so. And I think that was kind of a clever way of doing this episode like that. It isn't just Teen Titans Go, where you just like have an episode where they're just going to harass fans or harass the haters of the show and just directly yell at them. They packaged it really nicely in terms of how the critique is done. It is very meta, but it isn't like extremely fourth wall break meta, talking directly to the viewers. They integrate it into the story and the universe very well using that book.
This also probably has some of the best one-liners of the season as well.
Yeah.
For example, Twilight, unpopular, and I don't like it. And Pinky's, you already know me, or whatever. I can't remember.
You've known me for years.
Yeah, that's it. You've known me for years. It's like, she's even more funny in real life. You've known me for years.
And like I was staying in the chat room when we were watching the episode, it was like, Pinky, I don't think they're laughing with you. I think they're more laughing at you.
Which is a good sort of analogy with when she was being laughed at in the Return of Harmony two-parter, where which was created by Discord. So it was kind of a good sort of it was a sort of a bit of an analogy to that.
I really liked something this said a lot this season. This season's really had a lot of really strong continuity, and I feel like this episode also really continued that. And I know Larson, regardless of what he wrote or didn't write in this episode, he was one of the first writers, I think, that really brought strong continuity to the show. And it's something we've seen him really improve upon since then, and Joanne and Christine have been really good at bringing that to this season as well. And that's something I really liked about this episode, going back a few seasons here to season 4 and using that friendship journal. Now it's all kind of in disrepair and stuff. But it was kind of a great callback that fit really naturally into kind of the story they were trying to tell in this episode. And of course, we get all those direct callbacks to those episodes and stories that are in the journal there as well, which throughout the episode, which is also I find really enjoyable.
Also, I noticed someone said that the library was destroyed by T-Rex, so how did the book survive? But actually, some books did actually survive the explosion. If you actually go back and look at the episode, some books did actually survive. You can't specifically see the Book of Friendship in that scene because it moves so fast, but there is more than a distinct possibility that the book survived.
It's been a while since I've watched that episode, but there is a scene in that when this is the scene where they're reading through the book and they kind of discover the key pages of it. I don't think they're reading that in the library, though, are they? That scene that they were reading it in wasn't in the library, which makes me believe that the book wasn't in the library anyway.
Possibly. Regardless, there were books that actually survived that explosion if you look back anyway. So, you can make either argument, really. So, yeah, I mean, they didn't throw a boo-boo into the works for continuity because of that. That's all I really wanted to say. It is canon that it could have survived. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not like it definitely disappeared at the end of season 4. It didn't. It survived. There's a clear case that it could easily have survived. So there's no issue there. Not that it really matters, because I think that you could make an easy case to say that it was sort of if they'd have lost it, they could have rewritten a number of them. So but it doesn't matter.
Here we go.
Also,
yeah, here's a screenshot of it. That is most certainly not Twilight's library. So the book was definitely somewhere else other than the Ponyville library anyway.
Good spot. I didn't remember that scene. So yeah,
that's one of my favorite scenes of season 4, when they finally kind of connect all of those dots.
Yeah. I haven't watched season 4 for a while now. I really need to get back to doing that.
There's so many now. It's hard to go back and have time to go back and rewatch them.
Yeah, it'd be like, let's have a marathon of watching every episode that's been on so far. And then you see how many there is and how long it would take it. It's like,
yeah.
That image that's the Ben's posted. Who needs fax machines and photocopiers? Just clone Starlights. Actually, that would be a terrible idea.
Let's just hope Starlight Glimmer never encounters the mirror pool.
Oh god. That would be terrifying.
Then she can kill. They can kill every pony else and just make a ton of copies of her. So then everyone will truly be equal.
Yep, everyone will be equal. And everyone will be identical.
That's the true end game to the series. What I really liked about this, though, is how it does kind of go right head on and kind of poke fun at some of the criticisms of the show, but it also kind of gives the opportunity for the characters themselves to sort of stand up for themselves. I think the best example is probably with Fluttershy in the episode, how people, or some of the ponies that from out of town there come and like harass her with these very in-your-face criticisms about how, she keeps having the same episodes over and over again, which is a legit criticism that has been offered to her from the fan base in the past, in terms of her episodes keep being the same and she never makes any, development or progress. But then she's able to come back there and actually stand up to them and like give reasons why that happened, which is I think was pretty cool. That it's not something you would really expect this show to ever be able to do, but in the context of this episode, they're actually able to do that.
And the thing is, though, I don't really subscribe to that argument anyway, because yes, the themes of some of her episodes have been the same, but the actual meat and the actual main things, it's like saying Hurricane Fluttershy and Philly Vanilli have the same broad lesson. Well, yes, they do, but one deals with an external conflict and one deals with an internal conflict, which makes it makes both episodes very different episodes. In terms of how they're actually executed. So I've never really subscribed to that argument anyway.
Well, that's kind of what this episode is speaking out against that argument.
Is the pony that she basically essentially stands up to. Basically says, you're not anything like you are in the books. I don't know how to feel about that. So it's a case of when someone actually brings evidence that that you're necessarily wrong, they don't necessarily feel like they've changed. Then they're not like they're changing their viewpoint. It's very bizarre how some people, even when presented with absolute 100% facts that that their case is not as watertight as they may have originally thought, that they still cling to their sinking ship of ideology. Some people go to try and keep their opinion as valid as possible, though it's quite amusing to watch. The thing is, though, everyone is entitled to an opinion of this show, and but don't expect everyone to agree with you. I think that's a fair lesson to expect. But by the same token, whatever media you create, don't expect there to be a common consensus for your work, because there will not be one. There could be something that gets, say, like 100 on Metacritic, but there's still going to be someone out there that just didn't like it. It's just law of averages. Not everyone's going to enjoy what everyone else enjoys. Just one of those things.
I think one of the things that the episode was showing throughout is in terms of showing people giving very heavy criticism, I guess you could say, very loud criticism of things, but not really backing it up with any reasons or valid points or evidence to it, just kind of saying, I don't like this, and directly going and harassing the characters or kind of the creators of the media there about it. Sorry, losing my train of thought, and kind of harassing them about it, but not really, but giving that criticism without having thought it through. And we kind of see that with the Fluttershy example, where she's able to just come right back and kind of say why they're wrong in that criticism of her, because they didn't really think it through. They're just kind of saying something shallowly, not really thinking about it, and then just throwing criticism and yelling, not just giving criticisms, but yelling and oppressing that criticism onto them for it, which is something that you see more and more often, unfortunately, nowadays with it, where people are just like, oh, I hate this, oh, this is shit, or whatever, but never give actually reasons or constructive criticisms. They just kind of be as loud as possible. And of course, with the internet and Twitter and whatnot, it's very easy to just put that right on the creators of something you're watching, and not actually help anything, and just kind of do nothing but yell and bitch.
Thing is, though, with the internet, with there being so many people, basically, when there's only so many finite people that create a work, you're having an audience that's many times the size of the staff that actually work on any particular project. And I'm not just talking about Pony, I'm just talking about anything that eventually may have some sort of a fan base, even if it's quite a small one. It's always difficult to play to a crowd. You're not going to be able to please everyone in the crowd. But the thing is, sometimes you've got to be a bit careful how you obviously treat your crowd. You don't want to treat them like dirt. They're your paying customers, essentially, or your potential customers. So sometimes you do have to be, tread a fine line sometimes. But sometimes you do have to just, stand up there and just say, no, I won't take this. And that's fair. That's fair enough. If you're, you're only human, and anyone's only human. You could turn around and say, well, people that have criticisms that may sometimes take it too far. That's kind of human nature. And it's like, well, I guess, but sometimes some people could do with learning how to learn with some restraint. And you're not gonna get what you want. If you want to get what you want, then either write some fan fiction or try and work on your own show or work on try and get in the industry and make that change that you want, not necessarily on the show on the one particular show that you like, but if you want to do broad strokes, then you can be the change you want to be. There's nothing to stop you.
And I think it's kind of something they address at the end in terms of something not speak to everyone, where we see that the journal, even though all of these other ponies that we see throughout the episode are taking things differently and yelling at something and disagreeing over who's best pony and whatnot, we see the two kids at the end who actually legitimately got something out of it and enjoyed it and took a lesson from it. And I think that's another kind of important thing that speaks to all media and pony as well, that if you don't enjoy something, that's fine. It's something like, it's fine to not enjoy something, but just because you don't enjoy it doesn't mean the work itself might be bad, nor that the work itself might not speak to other people. Or maybe that lesson wasn't really meant for you, or maybe this episode wasn't really directed towards you, and that's okay. And it's okay, you're not supposed to like it. You don't have to like it just because of that, but you have to sort of realize that hey, maybe I'm not taking what I'm supposed to be taking away from this, or maybe this message is meant for other people. And we kind of see that at the end there, where we get the two fillies again who actually did take something important away from it, and the journal did really help them about it. And of course the important thing there is, if a story doesn't speak to you, or maybe a lesson wasn't meant for you or something like that, and you don't enjoy it, there's certain ways that you really should express that and certain ways that you shouldn't express that. And this episode gives a lot of those kind of ways that really you shouldn't do that.
There was 3 other ponies that seemed to take something positive from the book. It wasn't really, lent on that very much, because I think we all know it's essentially going to be in a future episode, and that's wanting to start up that cutie mark camp. I would say that out of all, other than 2 fillies, the other ponies that seemed to wanted to take something positive from the journal was the CMC.
But see, I don't know if they actually showed them taking much from it or not, because really the point they kind of made with it was that they were using it as advertising to get more people to potentially come to their camp because they had the journal.
Which, you could say is a negative or a positive thing, but to be fair, you could turn around and say, well, they're using a bit of nepotism to get the thing. But I mean, when two of the CMC are sisters to the elements of harmony, I know if I had a famous brother or sister, I'd probably freaking latch onto the coattails of that.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I'm not sure at the point of if I would count them as actually also learning something from the book or not. Then again, they've also written chapters in the book.
Yeah, so yeah,
or a
that's
chapter.
That's the funny thing. No one chapters. Although by the looks of it, they must have only had the one, or it was heavily edited by Twilight. Who knows? Or even Starlight. I mean, who knows? magic is a wonderful thing because it's magic. Anything fucking goes. In fact, you could basically essentially say, well, why does this happen in Equestria? Fucking magic. Why does that happen in Equestria? Magic. You know.
And it's not a
That's why-
completely
It's
wrong
magic, I
answer.
ain't gotta explain shit. Sorry.
It's magic why Celestia likes cake.
Cake is magic.
God, I'm just imagining.
And yet it's still
how a
lost its
Celestia-based
Splatfest.
show that's called Cake is Magic. Let's spin off. Make it now. It's a cookery show where Princess Celestia makes different cakes and then eats them at the end of them like Cookie Monster.
But yeah, I guess this episode seems, I know there's been a lot of negativity surrounding it for various reasons, whether that be some people got called out on their criticisms and they didn't like it, or people just thought maybe it was a little too harsh to said people. But overall, the response I think has been pretty positive from what I'm seeing. Besides those loud people that didn't like it.
The main complaint the main complaint I've seen that's not necessarily about necessarily calling out the fandom is that the episode's tone was a bit mean. And I'm thinking to myself, well,
that's what I was
Larson does
saying,
have
yeah.
Larson does have previous with that. If you look at Ponyville Confidential, that episode also had the criticism level that it could be a bit mean at times. But I think that there was legitimate reason. If anything, Ponyville Confidential, my teeth in, it is like an inverse version of this episode. Whereas in Ponyville Confidential, you had authors basically, saying terrible, awful things about essentially, what was their potential audience, the public. Whereas, with this episode, Fame and Misfortune, you have the authors that are being, essentially ridiculed and abused by the audience. So it's an inverse of that relationship from Ponyville Confidential. Obviously, there's more to it in both episodes than just that, but that is, it's kind of an interesting sort of, misnomer that the fact that it's also the same writer that did both of those episodes.
Let me see, gather my thoughts again. But yeah, but even then, like I said, it's even though this did have, seems to be a controversial episode, I don't know. I've seen a lot more positive responses to it than I have negative responses to it. Most people really seem to enjoy it and enjoyed kind of the poking fun. I just don't get sort of where people are getting this really negative connotation of it. Yeah, it's poking fun at a lot of the fandom, the most stereotypical of fandom complaints, but it never seems to have a really mean tone about it. It doesn't seem to. Yeah, I mean, the only other kind of complaint I've seen is that some people didn't like that they kind of mainly showed the negative sides of it, but I kind of think that was the point. And yeah, I guess you could have shown some more positive sides of it, but they did show the two fillies. That was the positive side of it. And you could have done that, but then you're looking at it, muddling it more and not delivering kind of a clear message that you were trying to, and also running into time constraints as well. I think the episode was really focused on those kind of negatives. That was kind of the point. It was sort of trying to show you ways that you're not supposed to be, acting,
I think the interesting thing is that there's no, you could say that we see the two fillies obviously learning something from the book, and that how that's a positive thing to take out. But really, in terms of the actual, the ponies that keep making complaints, there was never really a resolution to that, which I find quite interesting. Although I do find it hilarious, the idea of once the episode ends, Applejack says, we need to do something about them. I just like the idea that Twilight just tells them to fuck off, basically.
Well, I think that was sort of part of the episode's moral there, in that you're not going to be able to satisfy everyone. they could have had some ending where Twilight does something and, oh, everything's fine now. But I think this episode was trying to be a little bit more realistic to it. Yeah, I think the entire point of the episode was it being a little bit more realistic about it and saying that, hey, yes, if you make work, guess what? There's going to be people that are going to criticize it. And a lot of those criticisms might not be good or valid criticisms. And if you get, if your work becomes popular and stuff like that, you might get harassed and stuff like that about it. And you just have to deal with it. And you have to accept that in the end, you can do all you want. You can go and sing this big grand song in the end to try and change their minds. But some people, you just aren't going to be able to do that. And that's a fact of life. And I think a pretty realistic viewpoint that the show offers there.
One other little thing, obviously, I'm guessing this counts it in writing. Obviously, To the Ruler and Coconut Cream, I believe, are both ponies that actually appeared in Generation 3 of NLP, which is also another, obviously, generation that gets a lot of flack. The thing is, though, the kind of the difference, a lot of the flack that Generation 3 generated was kind of deserved, to be honest. Which, makes it so you can say, well, there was people that actually, there were creators and stuff that put stuff in there. But I'm sorry, but if anyone creates Generation 3.6 of Scootaloo, they deserve to rot in hell. I'm sorry, but if you create Demon Spawn, you must be the son of Satan, and therefore you must go back to where you once came from. I'm joking, by the way. If you're thinking I'm being serious, I am actually joking.
And it's kind of interesting. It's something that I believe We Are Borg, whoever did the follow up on Equestria Daily, had mentioned about it. That was kind of in the early days of the fandom. That was sort of the earliest complaints and earliest negativity sort of thing, and wasn't really leveled at this show, but more leveled at the previous generation of it. So it's kind of funny seeing them bring that right into the beginning of this episode and have those focus around these characters that were from that previous generation there.
I think G3 was pretty stupid, and it obviously does dwell on a lot of the and play on a lot of the stereotypes that you have on little girl shows. Mm-hmm. But I don't really hate it all that much. MLP Tales, though, that has such rancid morals that I really do dislike the show because of it. But that's a different reason. I think that a lot of those bad morals that MLP Tales that are in that I don't think they were done maliciously or with that intent. It was just such poor execution, and that's how it sort of ended up being. And there is legitimate criticisms that you can make at any show. This show, I mean, there are legitimate complaints that you can say. I mean, let's take MA Larson episode. I think a legitimate complaint that a lot of people would say is that Magical Mystery Cure was very pressed for time, and so certain areas of the episode were rushed. I think that is a legitimate complaint that you can level. Is that really anything that you can say negative on the show? Well, yes, but I think I would take the positive of, look at how much they managed to achieve in 22 minutes. So, there is a flip side that you can make to, virtually any argument.
I think one of the other things that this episode covers is not to judge a book by its cover, and it sort of literally says that at the beginning, like verbatim in the beginning of the episode. And I think that's another thing that it sort of focuses on throughout.
The irony is that Starlight actually says, this once I think I might. Which, is perhaps foreshadowing for what we ended up seeing in the episode itself. Also, Rain, you don't necessarily have to agree that MMC is rushed, but it's definitely a complaint that you see very often with that episode.
I'm not denying that people complain about it. I'm just saying I don't agree with it.
You just don't subscribe to it, which, I think that the episode does have issues. I think it's more to do with pacing than necessarily it being rushed, but that's again is basically down to the time limit. I just think it tried to do a hell of a lot in 22 minutes. Now you can say it on the flip side and be praised that it was trying to do so much, but then sometimes you could be negative and say that it was trying to do too much. And I think there is legitimate arguments to be made for both sides on that. I mean, that episode is probably going to run and run and run and run and run and run for arguments that'll probably always be with that episode. I mean, it's the episode that essentially split the fandom. A lot of people will say, whether that's true or not. I didn't really notice a split. But then again, I didn't really read a lot of the comments because by then things would degenerated quite massively, and also I just don't have time for this shit.
I do like how this episode sort of takes us through the evolution of a fandom of it, where we first see the Twilight publishing the work there and handing it out and getting it out, and then we see a lot of this kind of mirrors MLP too, which is pretty funny. We see all of the fillies kind of get a hold of it, and they all want to talk to Twilight, and they're very excited about it and want to get her signature or taking stuff from the book. And then we get to the point where all of a sudden Twilight and Starlight encounter like these adult fans of it, and they look taken pretty aback by it, and all they want is their signature, and then they're just going to take it and bag the item. So we start to get these like a bigger fandom, and you get the fans that are actually like, oh, we got to keep it in mint condition, and not really maybe fans of the 100% fans of the content of it as much as some of those younger viewers were. And then you sort of get to the when stuff sort of evolves into the debating and arguing, critiquing, and taking it too seriously maybe, and getting into it a little too much, and you get then you start getting all the factions, you start showing all the different factions of it, and we see that very clearly throughout the middle of the episode. As it's not just the fans of their work yelling or criticizing on the main six. You also see them fighting within each other over who's bad and who's good, and who they like, who they don't like. And we see them very blatantly criticizing Rarity at one point, and we see the Dash fangirls and stuff like that. So we get, and of course we get to the point at the end. We get stalkers, and then we finally get to the part at the end of the episode where pretty much everything turns into a giant clusterfuck of them just raiding the castle there, outside the castle, almost having like a riot out of there. So it's a very interesting and quick take through the life cycle of a fandom there.
I'm just trying to think of an analogy with the Sonic fandom, but I'm just thinking essentially everything got burnt to the ground in 2006 anyway, so.
We can also see some of the faults of the main six in this as well, in terms of how to respond to critique. Like, you kind of have a double-edged sword here, like with Rarity, where maybe people that are giving criticism like that, so blatant criticism in a public place, should be a little bit more mindful of how they're talking about the people that they're talking about, and maybe keep in mind how what they say can affect those people. Not saying that they shouldn't criticize, but saying how you do it is important. And obviously those ponies there were not really doing it that nicely. But on the other flip coin, you see Rarity's reaction to it and how she pretty much goes 100% certifiably insane in response to it and just completely collapses by hearing that one criticism of her. It maybe not a valid criticism backed by any points and very harsh, of course, but having no thick skin about that. And when you're putting yourself out there in this sort of instance in public by publishing this book, and you're the creator of it, or a character in it in this case, you're putting yourself out there, and you got to be ready for that kind of stuff to come back. And obviously Rarity was not ready for that.
It's interesting to see how much Fluttershy has developed as a character in this episode. Oh, gee, look, there's it's almost like the show's detractors can be disproven by just actually watching the show. But you see how much Fluttershy actually stands up for herself. She would have never have done that in seasons 1 or 2, or seldomly. I think the only time you would say that she perhaps saw some development in that area was Hurricane Fluttershy, and that's, I think, was the most important episode they ever did for the character. But
do note that the person who was making the criticism of her, when he was saying that you should be more assertive, and when Fluttershy actually does stand up for herself and be assertive, he basically immediately retracts his statement and says, "I liked you better when you were meek."
He didn't really say that. He doesn't know how you're not how you are in the books. I don't know how to think about that. It's a case of it's being caught on the hop and shown. Perhaps what you're saying is based in not necessarily the logic that you're seeing.
I think it's a very specific thing in terms of criticism. It's pointing out how some people are revert to change. So here you have this person who is constantly saying, "Oh, you're doing the same thing over and over again. You're not learning to be assertive. You're just learning the same lesson over and over again. I don't like this." And then when she goes and shows herself to now be assertive to his face, he doesn't know how to feel about that. He's like, I don't want it. Like, pretty much he didn't want that change. So now he's acting negatively towards there being that change when the change is what he wanted beforehand. And I think that's something you see a lot in people's reaction to different media.
But there's also the culmination of that with obviously probably the line that's probably forever going to be quoted from this episode. Twilight was better without wings.
And I like how they just lifted at that, because come on, it's such a stereotypical, outrageous complaint on its own that they just kind of let that be as one line.
I mean, you can very easily say, "Oh, I preferred the episodes before Twilight's before Twilight became an alicorn," and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with saying that, and I'm sure there are plenty of arguments you can make to say why you prefer when Twilight was essentially a unicorn. It's just so many people now don't even bother giving an excuse, and they just basically say, "Oh, it sucks, the show sucked and the dynamic is different now." But the thing is, though, if the dynamic was still the same as seasons 1 and 2 by this point, how stale and stagnant would the show be by now? You've got to think to yourself, it's all well and good wanting how things were in the past. I mean, you could almost say that it's a case of sometimes the status quo sometimes just does have to be broken apart, because the status quo is not God always. I mean, look at The Simpsons. How in terms of the characters, how much has really changed? How much development of those characters has there really been? The characters never age, whereas in this show, we do seem at least to be seeing some kind of evolution and possible passage of time. So you are seeing characters develop and move forward and be more than what they were when they were originally there. I mean, you would never have necessarily seen Applejack be try and be less eager to please everyone. Okay. She sometimes she'll try and think for herself necessarily than because she would be incredibly selfless before. Whereas now, sometimes she has to realise that, she can't do everything and that she's going to sometimes need help and be less stubborn, and, you've got Fluttershy obviously trying to be more assertive, but, and be, less thing. But I actually think Discord's probably been the biggest help for her in more recent episodes. And obviously you have, you could go for all of the characters and say, these characters have these flaws. Have they been working at them? And I would say for the vast majority of characters in the show, and that's not just the main 6, but I would include the CMC in that, and definitely now Spike. They are working on the flaws that they have, but you're never going to be 100% perfect. It's just not possible. It just doesn't happen. In the same way that there's no such thing as a perfect show, there's no such thing as a perfect episode or a perfect character or anything like that. And even if a character was perfect, you would end up having the argument of people calling her Mary Sue. So you essentially in that regard you can't win. So why play stupid games to win stupid prizes, basically?
I like how the entire song was pretty much, "We're not Mary Sue's, please stop calling us Mary Sue's," the song. I did like how they pretty much, all the characters laid out that they are, they all laid out their...
We're not flawless, they say that they're not flawless, and yet the singing in that is pretty fucking flawless, to be honest.
But I did like how each of them kind of shows that they are aware of, and pretty much sing about what exactly each of their flaws are, and shows that I'm aware of what my flaws are, but our flaws are what kind of make us who we are. Yeah, and some of the other kind of things that the episode pokes fun at with of course the criticism that Pinky's always just there for comic relief and has no other substance to her, which she goes into farther about in the song as well during her part in the song there. Yet Applejack is going complete overboard with the family thing and kind of poking fun at the whole like background pony thing, or being the least popular kind of pony of the main 6 with that, where they're suddenly saying she's popular and stuff. It's kind of, again, that fun little poke at a lot of the fandom jabs on it. And that's the thing. It's just everything about this just seemed like kind of tongue-in-cheek fun, poking the show, poking fun of itself and poking fun at some of the criticisms leveled at it. Some people, I just don't see where people are getting this vile from. It's not. There's no vile in the message.
You could say that for virtually every episode of the show, though. I think that's what this show episode is essentially, showcasing it to a certain degree. Can I just say that Applejack makes for best fainting couch?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how comfortable that would be, Rarity, to be honest. She is a drama queen, though. There's no denying it. That's why we love her. Or at least that's why I love her.
And yeah, there's this whole thing about the main 6 were just kind of publishing this journal, or Twilight, I guess, specifically was publishing it to try and get these good lessons out to people. And of course, people come in here and just overanalyze everything in there to the point where I loved the line at the end there where you get sort of that reviewer pony that comes in at the end there and talks about how I think your character would have been better if you just stayed in Canterlot. My character, what the fuck are you talking about? All this stuff in the book actually happened.
It's like, we're real ponies. It's like, well, no, you are actually animated, but, Pinky's probably aware of that, but you're not, Twilight.
It was kind of funny seeing them all take this as fiction.
The thing is, though, it's essentially a publishing of a, you know, I wouldn't say a fictionalized, but it's a, you know, it's you know, it's a one pony's perspective of a certain situation and what they learn out of it. What other ponies that were in that say, for example, you could have had a lesson learned by Rainbow Dash, and then Daring Do / AK Yearling could have learned a completely different lesson from the same situation. So, you know, you're not getting the full story, and you're only getting one perspective of a certain thing. That's not a criticism of the journal or of anything like that, but it's something that you need to bear in mind whenever you read such a thing. What's you know, let me put it like this: what a character gets out of what happens in an episode may not necessarily be the same thing that you yourself get out of it. I mean, with this show, I would say that you know, they interlock a lot more than a lot of other shows. I mean, you know, I think there's another thing that is not really touched upon in this show, but a lot of people, you know, do actually relate to one of the main six, or even some of the other characters that are in this show. And when they see things that don't necessarily reflect on themselves, they see that as an affront, which is obviously totally wrong, because then, you know, those characters aren't you. You know, they may well share some similarities to you, but that's just it. They're just similarities. It's not a reflection of you. It's just something that's, you know, it's as much a reflection as if you were looking in a very piece of choppy water. Yeah, it may look similar, but it's nowhere near the same.
And yeah, for an episode that's pretty much just like the second coming of Slice of Life, sort of like the opposite of it, where Slice of Life was sort of featuring all like the fan, you know, all of these positive sides of the fandom, and all the featuring all these different characters and jokes and stuff. And it's kind of the opposite, like showing like what happens when you get like a lot of people that become highly critical of something, and overly critical, you could argue, of it. And I had a point I was going to make.
I think there is one. I think there is one thing you could say with this episode, is that it doesn't really distinguish between any criticism at all being you know, it shouldn't be considered negative to not give any criticism whatsoever, because otherwise no media would ever get better, really. Because, you know, I think let me look at it like this. Things like, say, you know, the Emoji Movie that recently came out, that has been critically panned by not just professional critics, but by anyone that's actually really watched it. The thing is, though, is, you know, the target demographic has obviously reacted to it reasonably well, because, you know, obviously it's still done fairly well at the box office. But the thing is, though, the thing is, though, this show, going to a movie, going to see a play, going to the theatre, whatever, it's art. And, you know, or looking at a painting or anything like that, it's art. And art is always going to be, to a certain extent, subjective. And what someone takes out of that piece of art is going to be different from one person to another. One person's piece of absolute crap could well be, you know, another person's masterpiece. And you know, who are we to judge what is a level of quality? You know, who is the ultimate judge of quality? And really and truthfully, the answer to that is your own barometer. And but, you know, what you enjoy versus someone else could be wildly different.
But I don't think this episode was really that as much focused on that. It was more focused on the I guess can't think today.
You know, the repetitive complaints.
No, I mean, well, yeah, that, but no, the I forget what I was gonna say. I had a point in there somewhere, but I lost it. let's just continue. So what did everyone think about the characters and the characterization in the episode?
As far as the main cast was going, everyone still was just as they always were. About to say, Twilight was basically just doing like her regular, you know. I don't really know what to say to the characters that we haven't really covered, from anyone else.
I suppose one thing you could say is that we don't learn anything new from the characters.
Yeah.
And that is a legitimate thing that you can say about this episode. But we don't learn anything new. But I think the thing is that I think it was more reinforcing what we have learned from the characters rather than necessarily learning anything different.
But here's the thing: is the episode's point to learn more about the characters, or to have the characters learn something and us learn something through them? Because I would argue that the characters did learn something in the episode, even if we didn't learn anything new about them. And I think that's okay to have an episode maybe you learn more about the characters, or an episode where the characters learn something and you learn that lesson with them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in episode there was two ponies that definitely did learn a lesson. We obviously it was not something that was, it was a side thing to the main point that the episode was trying to make. But obviously, we have the two fillies that obviously definitely.
Well, I mean, I think the main six learned a lesson in here, not just the two fillies that learned a lesson from the book.
Twilight learned to burn every copy of the book. I'm messing about, by the way. I know that's not the message at all.
But yeah, it was kind of the characterization of them, while maybe not developed in this episode, was brought into focus in the episode, though, in a very not subtle way there. So we're able to kind of see how they've grown and what their personalities are and what their faults are kind of laid out.
While the main six we don't learn necessarily anything majorly new, I do think there is a character that does show a bit of development here, though, and that's Starlight Glimmer. We actually see her obviously taking the mantle and actually trying to help solve a friendship problem, rather than necessarily have been, and instead of being sort of, say, slightly impulsive, she takes like some of the friendship lessons that she's learnt from the book to try and help try and alleviate this situation. I thought it was in this book, maybe it wasn't. Here we go. Trying to find something in here. Okay, gonna skip over it. Ah, yes. There we go. So because that's one of the things I've seen talked about a lot, is in terms of the friendship journal apparently outing Daring Do as A.K. Yearling, but I
that's just not the case. Because, I mean, pretty much all Dash talked about in the book. I mean, she must have said daring do when she was reading it, because not even in Dash's entry in the journal is there really anything about it. Doesn't even mention daring do. It just says I had the coolest adventure with the coolest pony ever. So at the very least, yeah, I don't think that is really going to do anything in terms of that. Some people seem to think that there was some sort of continuity error there, but there really isn't.
I could also like to say that if Twilight was any sort of responsible pony, she would have, scrubbed through the friendship journal beforehand, and she probably would have expunged any personal details or anything that would have put somebody at risk.
Okay, let's go ahead and continue then. What does everyone think about the episode's voice acting?
Everyone pretty much brought their A game here. Everyone really did an amazing job. Main cat, but the voice actors for some of the background ponies were really kind of great. That one particular one who was like that fanatic near the end who was like screaming, "Are Applejack and Pinkie Pie really related?"
It was quite a large voice cast for this episode, as Radio Dog has just posted in the chat. What's amazing is that's only the first page. That's not even including the singing performers for the song. I think the strongest voice work we see in the episode is definitely in the song, and
Great.
I don't think you can't mention the song without mentioning the incredible counter melodies that Andrea Libben does as Fluttershy. It's exquisitely good.
We'll get there. In regards to that line, that was again another kind of funny little jab at sort of just people people in fandoms who what's the word I'm looking for? They really focus on the most pointless of points and kind of antagonize over that, like sort of like that guy that was so outrageously enthralled in whether or not Pinkie Pie or Applejack are related, like it was completely missing the entire point of the episode. It completely, or the journal entry in that case in the end, and completely missing the lesson and the point, and just focusing in on, I need to know if they're related or not, and having the episode or the journal entry there put into a negative light simply because they didn't mention that, and not thinking highly of it because of that, and completely missing the entire point of why they didn't do that. I think that was a good little subtle jab in just that one line. It was funny because it was an actual kind of thing you hear a lot, but it's also a subtle little critique of that.
The irony is, since this season, obviously just the episode before, you could just imagine that there's going to be people saying, "I preferred Applejack when she weren't half pear." Anyway, does that mean that she can no longer be called Applejack? She's Pearjack?
I mean, she's still half apple, so it's not.
Apple conference Jack. There you go. Or Apple Russet Jack. I'm just thinking of different types of pear now. That's bad. I shouldn't do that.
Yep, they had a lot of the, pretty much a lot of the main cast there in this episode. Not even a lot of new ones, just a lot of the main cast coming to play, like Michael Dobson, Peter New, was the reporter pony, and the pony that criticized Rarity as well. And even though he didn't have any lines as Big Mac in there in the episode. So this one used a lot of their core cast to show for it, with the exception of the two fillies.
I preferred Big Mac when he only said yep and nope. Because that joke run. I'm talking out of my ass, by the way.
See, so okay, let's
Well,
go.
I thought you were going to say that, what's any different, and to be fair, that would be fairly true.
Okay, let's move on to the episode's humor for it. This episode obviously had a lot of humor, a lot of meta humor in it. A lot of it we've pretty much already mentioned in the story. But yeah, what do everyone think about the episode's humor?
Let's see. We'll start off. We got Twilight literally getting caught in the crossfire of an argument between two fillies. That was really fun. This was like a lot of good humor, not so much just the meta as well, but there was also a lot of jokes on there. Rainbow Dash flipping through the journal, and then all of a sudden there's that explosion of confetti, and then she just gives that seriously deadpan "found Pinky's" page. Remember that little point where, like, during the argument where that adult stallion finishes his meal, and then, like, one of the fillies' warring projectiles actually just flies over and lands on his plate, knocking the rest of his meal off the table. And he just looks at it for a second. He just sort of like shrugs his to say whatever, and he just immediately starts chowing down.
I really like. There's a lot of good visual humor that's on display in this episode as well. There's like, well, yeah, there's obviously that fucking picture that we've just seen in chat of Rarity's face there, but more specifically, it's like when they mention when Rainbow Dash mentions to Fluttershy that her lessons are so small that anyone can barely see them. She says, I was just leaving more space for you to write yours, and she sort of looks sort of very sheepish afterwards. So I just found that quite amusing.
It's a Rarity's just whole kind of insanity there just kind of has a bunch of things with it. She's got that stress sewing that going on. Like Twilight's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Stress sewing," and then like afterwards, she completely makes that totally garish looking outfit, and Rarity's like, "Rarity, what are you wearing?" "My emotions, darling. Stress couture." Even Starlight, when she was like, after Rarity got insulted, she decided that she's going to go have a little chat with the ponies who insulted Rarity. But whatever that chat entailed, the fact that the ponies returned no worse for wear at the end of the episode implied that whatever Starlight did just didn't work at all. Applejack bursting in on Rarity's stress sewing session and then ordering 100 blankets, and then Rarity's like, "Right away, pony who still likes me." The fact that even after she breaks down, she just starts saying "darling" at the end of her sentence is not entirely unlike a certain G3 fashionista. And then, like we mentioned, Rainbow Dash just not able to go to the bathroom without even people telling her how cool she is. And then the whole Sweet Apple admirers who've taken her lesson about how friends are family to heart, and now they want to be part of the Apple clan. Like, can't you get rid of them and kick out my own family? Of course, we had the situation like with Fluttershy when one of the characters being complaining how hard Fluttershy is able to relate since she's so shy. A pony standing right next to her with Fluttershy fan gear just kind of awkwardly steps away from her. Yeah. Then we mentioned earlier with the Pinky one where she's being laughed at, and one of the persons like, she's funnier in real life. You've known me for years. And of course, we've also covered the my character, we're real ponies. The journalism, the kind of real things that actually happen to us. Then, of course, I think there was that one issue with the meta one where they all started singing that one song, and then as soon as they got finished singing the song, everyone just completely proceeded to ignore it entirely. That's pretty much all I know off the top of my... Oh yeah, Starlight awkwardly mentioning she knew how to spell to duplicate books when she learned it years ago to duplicate a certain manifesto. Another little callback to her season 5 days.
I liked how Kelly Sheridan delivered that line there with the with the pause. A certain manifesto.
Yeah, that was great there how she did that.
It's kind of worrying how all a number of things that she was doing. Obviously, when she was essentially, you might as well essentially saying brainwashing essentially ponies. Essentially, it's not quite that, but it's not far off. It's amazing how many of the sort of the magic she's learned from like the devious things she was doing there, and pretty. Nasty things. It's amazing how useful some of those things have actually turned out as she's actually been, learning about the magic of friendship.
It's not the magical spell. It's how you use it.
Yeah, Technotron posted a good one here in chat room where there was a moment where Rarity was just started to take Fluttershy's measurements, and Fluttershy just gives her that, "What the hell are you doing, Fluck?"
Yeah, well, like right before that, when Rainbow Dash is talking, and then the camera kind of pans over, and is like, Rarity, what are you wearing? My emotions, darling. It's just, oh, Tabitha was definitely.
Tabitha was just on point in this one here.
What I like is in this episode as well. I know this is slightly more to do with voice acting than necessarily humorous as such, but it's interesting. Obviously, you have like Pinkie Pie. When she's shouting things like "You've known me for years." When you see Fluttershy, when you hear Fluttershy raising her voice, unlike sometimes, she doesn't sound like a more mellow Pinkie Pie. She still sounds very much like Fluttershy, and I think that's a great credit to, and it's not something, it's something that you see from all the voice actors here, but I think that's a great credit to I think most of the voice actors here that voice more than one character now, they now sound so distinct that they could essentially be voiced by different people, and you would, people would believe you, and that's a great credit to the talent that's actually on display in this show.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the earlier episodes, you'll hear like Rainbow Dash and Applejack sound a lot closer, because Applejack's voice used to be a lot higher pitched, and it was a lot closer to Rainbow Dash's pitch for it. But in subsequent seasons, Match the Ball kind of brought Applejack's voice pitch down, and so now there's a very distinct difference between those voices. And same with Pinkie. When Pinkie starts yelling, Andrea kind of adds this really very crass, like kind of sound to it, so it's very intense. But with Fluttershy, she's yelling, but she's kind of yelling like a yelling whisper, I guess would be, because she still keeps that very high-pitched, light-sounding sound, but just excludes a lot more air out for it. So she's like a very loud whisper.
Kind of reminds me of that situation with, like, all the way back in season 1, where Fluttershy's like, "Oh, I'm just so frustrated, I could just scream," and then she just takes in that deep breath, and then she lets out that that very light sounding scream like there.
Well, with animation and visuals, pretty much everyone's already kind of commented on those, so not really much to talk about with that. But yes, a lot of great faces between Twilight and Rarity of course, throughout the episode there.
Just one thing we missed on humor was just how much Rainbow Dash shows that she doesn't, she can be, quite she can be egotistical, and she can be, she wants to, and loves being the center of attention. But there's like being the center of attention, and then there's being essentially someone's, there's the idealism that goes on to the point of stalking, and that's when it both gets simultaneously creepy and also disturbing, because Rainbow Dash, basically has not a minute that she can breathe, and the fact that they are following her literally to the toilet just because something exciting might happen, which, it won't. It just won't. It's just kind of it's amazing. It's just humorous seeing Rainbow Dash actually be, mildly meek and more withdrawn. In fact, I would say that Rainbow Dash in this episode is more withdrawn than Fluttershy is, which is quite freaking incredible, to be honest. But it's another example of how the characters have developed and evolved as time has gone on.
Okay, 1 second. Let me just restart this. Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, so, moving on to the song and musical numbers. Surprisingly enough, we had a other song. Why is this not? How long has that been messed up? Oh, hold on. Dang it. Why is that selecting riffs? Great. Is it still over there? If you all want to continue talking about something, go ahead. I need to figure something out. Reason why that should have been like that. Okay, so we can move on to the song now. Hopefully that's all. Problems are solved there. So I surprisingly enough, this episode had a song in it. After last week's episode, also had a song. So that's kind of cool. Fortunately, that does mean there's only one more song left in the season, but But yeah, it was a really it was a really enjoyable song. I think it was definitely a very traditional kind of MLP song. I guess fittingly enough. Had a very traditional instrumentation by that, and of course you have the acoustic guitars, and then a very prominent mandolin starting at the second verse, with lots of backing from violins and stuff. It was very catchy, of course, and of course featured the entire main six singing their harmonies, which always sounds great. And they each, of course, get their own little solo part as well. I like how each of these parts, it goes through and kind of has them listing their faults that they have, and some of the stuff they've been working on throughout the series as a nice little recap. And yeah, just really insanely catchy song. Probably the most catchy one of the season, in just terms of how much it's been stuck in my head since Saturday. So I'm gonna go ahead and I will play the instrumental here for it. Has some really nice kind of counter melodies in the violins there that are more prominent in the second and third iterations of the chorus that come by. It has this very catchy, upbeat nature of it, with a lot of the hits happening on the upbeats of it. There's those more prominent violins and woodwinds there. Get to the bridge. Definitely a very busy song in the instrumentation, especially when we get to the last two choruses there. We have a lot of stuff layered on top of each other of the melody and the counter melodies and all sorts of other flourishes and stuff on all the different instruments there, which leads to this really full sound to support the lyrics, which leads to its catchy nature there. One of the other things here is, go to that I want to point out, is the actual vocal track, because one of my favorite parts is actually in the final chorus there, which I'm gonna have to try and find. But in the vocals, like I said, the main six always have this really good harmony that goes on between them in the songs where they all sing together. I really like the final chorus here, because they give Fluttershy in the left channel this really higher pitched counter melody to the rest of the group, and then Pinkie Pie has a little offbeat, I guess you could say, part in that at the end, as a little callback line. But the Fluttershy part is really cool, because she gets this much higher pitched counter melody throughout that.
Fine now, don't you know?
Yeah, okay, so here's that final chorus.
Know it so well because, yeah, we're not flawless. We're a work in progress. We got dents and we've got quirks, but it's our flaws that make us work. Yeah, we're not flawless. We're a work in progress. So tell me what flaws you got to. Cause I still like what's flawed about you.
And I tell you, that's one of the best things about hearing the having these songs where they all sing, is you get these really good harmonies like that. But that Fluttershy counter melody there, it's not really often you hear one of the characters stand out that much in a counter melody, let alone Fluttershy. So that was really kind of one of my favorite parts about that song at the end, because it added just the right amount of additional, the right amount of stuff just in that last chorus that I needed to really build up that final chorus over the previous two ones. So it's a really, really, catchy song, very much a traditional sort of Friendship is Magic song. It has that same feel to it as well. Moving on to the backing score, not quite as much to talk about here as last week, but still a good amount. A couple of cool things, I guess, to point out with that as I go through, especially in terms of returning themes here. Let's see. We start out with this track. Nice little melody here for as Twilight is talking to the fillies. This next one here has a really nice theme as part of it when they are when Starlight's actually doing that magical spell, has this really kind of magical theme here. Should be coming up pretty soon to the spell here. Here we go. And speaking of returning themes, returning leitmotifs here, that's kind of the first major one there is when Starlight is talking about her manifesto. We get a little drop of her leitmotif from the Season 5 premiere there before her reformation. And we end with one of the newer themes here for the castle. Actually, I'm glad DM12 posted that, because that's something in my absent-mindedness today that I forgot to mention in the animation. One of the things I really liked about the song was the storyboarding and animation during the song. I really think that was some really great storyboarding for it. I liked it a lot more than the storyboarding that we had for the first song of the season. I love the split screens that they were doing with them, with all the characters there, and how that all flips around. Reminds me a lot of like the Babseed song, in terms of that. But I just really loved the visuals and the storyboarding and the whole flow of that song visually on the screen. That whole song sequence was really well done. Next thing we get to is the small montage scene that we have in the episode when Twilight is distributing the book around Canterlot there. So we get a little piece of montage score for that. And a cool thing about that one is it actually ends with the MLP brand motif there, for the theme song there as it pans up to the book, which is it's not something you hear a lot in the score of the series, so it's always kind of interesting when it comes up there. Let's see, this one is for I believe the one where everyone's laughing at Pinkie Pie. This is becoming a more common theme from Pinkie Pie. That cue there, that song that's been used for Pinkie Pie twice now. It was first used in the Lost Treasure of Griffinstone episode back in season 5 at the very beginning of that episode where she's baking stuff with Gummy, and it was used again in the Starlight episode last season when Starlight used the spell on all of them, and it was used when she was like baking with Pinkie Pie in that scene as well, and Pinkie Pie was going a little insane. It was used in there as well. So that's the third appearance of that one. Let's see. Not sure if there's anything in this track. Let me see. It's kind of a more somber track as Twilight's lamenting sort of all the negative stuff that the journals caused. The next track is something that I think was really cool about the episode. If you've heard me talk about score before, you know there's a couple main themes of the series that are probably the most prominent themes. Like Luna's theme is probably one of the more recognizable ones. And the other one that's a very recognizable theme, I think, is the Magic of Friendship motif. It's something that was introduced in season 3 in the Trixie episode in season 3 and was used again in the Discord episode there. But then it was used very extensively throughout season 4 as one of that season's main themes. It was used whenever kind of friendship was involved some way in the scene. They would play this theme behind it, hence the Magic of Friendship motif, and it was used again the same way in season 3. It continued to be used into season 5, but then it kind of stop being used as much as we get into season 6 in this season. I don't even know when the last time it's been used. I think it's been a while since it's been used in any meaningful form, mainly making way for other newer motifs to take its place. But yeah, this was one of my favorite motifs, and definitely one of the most direct ones in terms of showing people how the series uses leitmotifs in it, and reuses them throughout to mark certain points. So its main use in the series fell actually back in season 4. Like I said, that was kind of where it was used the absolute most for it, and that's, I think, pretty fitting, being that this is an episode that's focused around the friendship journal, which was also extensively used. Not only has to do with friendship, but it was extensively used throughout season 4 as well, being that was kind of the key to all the key stuff in the finale. So it was really cool to bring that back here when Twilight is very directly talking about the journal's purpose and friendship here right directly before the song, to the crowd outside there. And talking about the journal and talking about friendship was a very fitting moment to kind of bring this theme back after not really hearing it for a while. That was the more the fully orchestrated version. There's a couple different versions of that. Sometimes they have a piano or a glockenspiel, a little simpler versions. That was the very fully orchestrated version. It's really lovely. It was kind of cool to hear that back, and of course it gets cut off at the end there by that reviewer pony at it. But it was really neat, kind of a cool thing to bring that back, and that's one of the reasons I really like the score of this show, is because of that use of leitmotifs like that, and bringing them and reusing them back in different ways when it's fitting, of course. So that was kind of really really cool. So we get to the final track of here. I think there's a couple things in here. This is the final track of the episode. Ah, yes. One of the more recent lesson themes. Of course, the score in Pony is definitely very heavy with lesson themes and lesson motifs that we hear all the way since the beginning of the series. It's one of the more prominent things. When a lesson's happening, there's score, and usually it's reused. Each of the characters have their own lesson motif score and stuff. It was definitely used a lot more, I would think, back in the early seasons when we had journal entries or we'd have letters to Celestia and stuff. But we still get some in more recent seasons when we do have an explicit kind of lesson moment at the end of the episode. And this is one of the newer ones, very much in the same style as the older ones. Definitely has that friendship is magic essence to it, with the harp, piano, and glockenspiel taking the center stage there. Takes us to the end of the episode. So, of course, not anywhere near as much score as we had last week, but still some key tracks there to talk about there. So that does it with all the music for definitely the song being the highlight there. And I guess we'll see how long it takes us to get to the final song in this of the season. But definitely a great song to have added to the collection there. So what did everyone think about the episode's themes and morals? Because I think there was quite a few things it covered.
Didn't we already cover that at the beginning of the episode, basically?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
I say, well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to recap them. So the moral here is basically just, if you're gonna be, dealing with, people in regards to like, whatchamacallit, having a product, you're gonna have people who are not gonna, agree with you on everything, or they're gonna feel certain ways, and those ways that they feel may not be completely, positive. And best way to deal with that is just to not really think about it, and just learn to appreciate the people who do appreciate your product for what it is. And then there's always going to be like, the people who probably do like you, but then they may like you kind of a little bit too much, more than their own good, probably. So, a little distracted here with some other things here, so I do apologize.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's a lot of different little small things in it, because the episode really hits on a lot of different, I guess, no-nos to do in terms of being part of a fandom or criticizing, or critiquing something. There's a lot of like little lessons on both sides throughout the episode that kind of, even on top of the kind of the overarching big morals of it, like don't judge a book by its cover, and what Mr. Ben said as well.
Yeah, like some ponies will take your product as an excuse to fight and argue with each other. Say, and you can't stop people from arguing or criticizing you, but just don't let other people influence what you think.
Mm-hmm. So, favorite parts of it, or any big concerns that anyone had from the episode?
Not really anything that we haven't already covered, personally.
Yeah, I think I really did enjoy the meta. I mean, I think a lot of people were kind of taking maybe the episode a little too seriously. You kind of just have to step back and just kind of laugh at it sometimes, and laugh at yourself. The episode really didn't focus anything on anything specific, and just kind of played with some of the bigger complaints of the fandom, and used those to kind of capture sort of the morals and lessons that it was trying to tell. And I really liked it. I really did enjoy all those little references to character critiques that the show's is sort of being meta and acknowledging, like with Fluttershy and Rarity and Applejack, etc. And of course the lines like, I mean, I almost died when I heard the like Twilight before she had wings line, because that's about as meta as you can get in terms of over the top, sort of the most stereotypical fan critique of the show that you could think of, like one of the most overused ones for it. So that was kind of very funny to hear in the show. And of course I really enjoyed the song as well. I think that was definitely one of the big highlights of the episode, was that song, and how catchy it was as well. And a lot of very funny faces as well. The Rarity face was just I mean, yeah. It's that happened in the episode.
Creepy as heck.
I just love that turnaround and into that voice line there. It was just fantastic. So any final thoughts and concluding thoughts that anyone has?
Another good moral could be our usual lesson that could obviously apply to this one as well.
I would concur.
Yeah.
Well,
I suppose I really shouldn't say it at this point, but let's go ahead and do it anyway. Don't be a dick!
Be a dick!
Yeah.
Or a nitpicking dick, as Technotron mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I overall, I really enjoyed the episode. Maybe it's because I'm not someone who's very critical of the show usually. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with being critical of the show. I mean, let's put that out there. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just how you go about it. And are you going to offer legit critiques backed up with well thought out reasoning? Or are you just going to be a dick and yell at the creators that it wasn't exactly what you wanted? And I think that's kind of what the episode was more poking fun of. I mean, look at some of the stuff they were talking about. It's a lot of very general critiques of the show that are more just people complaining rather than offering some legitimate things that they'd like to see improved. Like the Twilight Wings line. So I don't know. I think even if you're someone who's more critical of the show, it's the show isn't being malicious. The show isn't telling you to stop criticizing it, or it's just for kids, stop criticizing it, or anything like that. It's just kind of having fun at poking fun at some of the outrageous criticisms that are sometimes leveled at the show, and having a little fun, some fun with the fans, which I enjoy shows doing. But it also encapsulates it in a story that makes sense in the universe, and some good lessons about that, about kind of criticism and stuff like that as well. Kind of adding on to some of the previous episodes, like the one with Quibble Pants, which was more focused on that criticizing is good and constructive, and sometimes people can disagree and have different points, but still both be in the right as well. So it kind of goes in additional to that as well. Yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it, and I was laughing the entire time, and it's not too often we get something extremely like meta or fan related like this. Last time we had was like episode 100, so it was nice kind of getting another little taste of that, especially after kind of the more serious like the last episode when we had a lot more serious and emotional episode there. So. Overall, like I said, I really enjoyed it. I don't really get a lot of the hate at it. I mean, I kind of understand why some people would be upset, but at the same time, I don't think those are like reasons you should be upset. Like, come on, just take a deep breath, step back, enjoy the show for it. Well, with that, that brings us to to the end of the episode today. So. Thank you all so much for joining us for this week's edition of Equine Episode Examination. We'll, of course, be back again next Tuesday at the same time, 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, to talk about this weekend's episode, which, by the way, we will, of course, be watching and live chatting along with this weekend at 11:30. That is episode number 15 of Season 7, Triple Threat. So, some characters returning in that episode. Sounds like it's going to be a pretty fun one. It's a Spike episode, so we all know it's gonna suck. So I'm just kidding. So yeah, be prepared next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time to talk about that on the next episode of Triple E. And also, if you really hate yourself, like I do, make sure to come this weekend to CQ Riffs at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, where this week we'll be riffing the cinematic masterpiece featuring Rob Schneider, known as Surf Ninjas.
Oh boy, that's gonna be good.
Yes. So that's... Oh boy.
Get ready to hang 10.
Get ready to have some fun there. So that's this weekend at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, just a little bit after the new MLP episode. So we'll see you for that, and of course we'll see you next weekend or next week, I should say, for Equine Episode Examination. So thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great evening, Bye bye.
Take care, everyone.